and welcome everyone to another episode of Peak TV. My name's Ukani, and I'm joined today by Michael Jardine of Ironbark Zinc, tickers ASX IBG. Hi Michael, welcome on the show.
Ali, thank you very much for having me. My first time on Peak TV, and great to be here.
For those who don't know, as a matter of disclosure, we've recently completed a $1.5 million placement for Ironbark. Michael, for those that are uninitiated to the story, why don't you give us a bit of an overview on what Ironbark story is?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. So we're a listed zinc-lead copper gold developer. We're in Greenland, which is the one we are most well known for, called the Jardine project. And we also have two base metal projects in New South Wales. The asset we have in Greenland is very large, enjoys the support today of some very meaningful groups around the world, and is an asset our board strongly believes in, and happy to share a bit more about that today.
That's great. So let's focus a bit on the Greenland asset. I mean, there's no doubt that the asset is fairly large scale and has also a bankable feasibility study that's previously been completed. Can you, Michael, give us a high-level overview on some of the unit economics there?
Yeah, sure, Ali. So I guess to go back slightly in terms of the history, we've had this asset for 15 years. I've been the MD for the last 3 years, during which time we have completely redone the feasibility study that you just mentioned. That was released in 2021. We have a very large resource, 85 million tonne resource, 50 million tonne reserve, proposed 20-year mine life. We have Glencore and Trafigura as shareholders of ours today, and project off-takers. We're on a granted mining lease. And we have, the preliminary support of US Exim Bank in terms of getting this, very large zinc mine up and running. If it was producing today, it'd be the largest zinc mine in all of some political Europe. Currently that's the Tara mine owned by Boliden in Ireland, but we're sort of 20% larger, indicatively. The project's got a, NPV of close to $400 million US dollars. At today's zinc prices, and leverage is up very rapidly, as the zinc price, appreciates from there. So we think it's a meaningful asset. There's no doubt. It'd be a top 10 to 12 largest zinc mines in the world if it was running today.
Well, that's great to hear. Let's chat a bit about what the next 12 months look like for Citroen. What are some of the major milestones that you're looking forward to?
Sure. We've been working through a financing process with US Exim Bank for almost 2 years now. So it has been, it's been a steady progress over that time. To explain who US Exim Bank are, it's the United States government official export credit agency. They have about 135 billion US dollars of financing authority. What they do is they lend money at very cheap rates to project owners like Ironbark in this instance, and we use that to procure goods and services out of the US. So we've been talking with US Exim about them cornerstoning, in fact, going in as the sole senior lender to the project. And off the back of that potential debt piece, we've been in the market for a little while talking to various groups around how we solve, I guess, for the project equity to come alongside that. 2022 has been a really important year. We did the site visit for the first time in several years, predominantly due to COVID travel restrictions. We got US Exim Bank to site in July of this year as part of their ongoing due diligence. So certainly that relationship is going to be a focus in the coming 6 to 12 months. We also have announced about 6 months ago now, an MOU with a large private Norwegian group called LNSAS, experts in operating in this part of the world, which is, the high Arctic. It's a permafrost environment, and they bring an enormous amount of, or potentially bring an enormous amount of capability to the group in terms of getting it built and then having the mining run over a period of decades. So that opportunity remains live and is also one that we're, very much focused on. Outside of those two things, 2022 has been a very rocky year for markets, as I think we all know. There's been, larger swings, whether it's in debt markets or equity markets or metal prices, than we've seen for a very long time. So I would hope over the next 12 months, some of that uncertainty or volatility begins to diminish, and it becomes a more favourable environment for large greenfield project development. So they're the focuses in Greenland anyway at this point.
So let's touch a bit upon zinc in itself. For those unfamiliar, I mean, everybody sort of knows a bit about lithium and graphite, and these commodities get quite a bit of spotlight. Tell us a bit about zinc, some of the major applications and use cases, and why you see it as an important part going forward in the commodity cycle?
Yeah, it's a good question, Ali. Zinc is an officially a critical mineral according to the USGS, so the US Geological Survey. It's not commonly thought to be critical like, say, rare earths or lithium or graphite, as you mentioned, but it is a much larger market today. There is no doubt. It's the fourth most traded metal in the world. The end use case historically has been for galvanizing purposes into steel. There is a direct, green benefit to that, i.e. the more zinc content per ton of steel, the longer the life is, and it doesn't need replacing it as quickly. And that part of the market underwrites about half of global zinc production today, and then it goes into various other alloys and industrial uses. So that market's very large, to somewhere between sort of 12 and 14 million tonnes of zinc metal per year. Now, if we project forward, we don't see a huge diminution of demand from those traditional market uses, but we see a massive potential for wind power in particular is very zinc intensive. So if we look at decarbonising platforms and how will zinc tie in with things like copper, nickel, lithium or graphite, offshore wind turbines in particular are extremely leveraged, or zinc is extremely leveraged to offshore wind would be a better way to put it, because you have to galvanise the entire structure, internal and external. So that's very zinc intensive. Solar PV cells, there's a meaningful amount of zinc goes into each installed kilowatt hour or megawatt hour of solar capacity. And then it's very likely that zinc will play some form of role in the battery ecosystem. It may never outcompete lithium because lithium has unique advantages in terms of the amount of energy it can store relative to weight. And that's why it ends up in mobility. But if you look at, say, grid scale storage or static storage on things like Powerwalls or equivalent, zinc is going to play a role in the battery space. And I think agriculture is the other one we see. It's a yield additive to certain parts of the world. India, for example, is a large producer of zinc metal, but it is importing zinc in other forms to increase yield. So growing population, we need to produce more food from less area over time. So there's 3 or 4 smaller markets today relative to zinc's traditional uses, but they are all growing much faster. If the traditional market's growing in the sort of 2 to 5% per annum, you're getting 50 to 100% growth out of these other markets. So they will very quickly become elements that are important to the overall supply-demand thematic.
It's very insightful. Stepping away from zinc now, Ironbark's got a portfolio of projects over in Australia. Let's chat a bit about the Fiery Creek project, which is something you've come out as saying that this is a new focal point for the company. What's been the reason behind bringing this project off the bench? Why now?
Yeah, it's another good question, Ali, and one I'm happy to expand on. So we've had this project likewise for a very long period of time. We've done a modest amount of work on it historically. We think the time is right now, particularly as we head into another winter in Greenland, where it's difficult to get to site and move things forward at a project level, that we have another avenue to generate value for the company. So Fiery Creek is a copper gold exploration license that we hold 100% of. It's got some scale. We've got 6 to 8 kilometres of strike. There's hundreds of old workings at the surface. It hasn't been drilled since the late 1980s. There's very few gold structures really anywhere in Australia that haven't seen drilling in the last 30 or 40 years. There is strike length to close out. It's barely been drilled below about 30 metres. We've got some very high grade copper and gold rock chips on the surface, and some moderate to high grades in historic drill holes. So this is something that we see as being valuable within a relatively short time frame. We think we can drive the value proposition for the company, because I think today it's perceived as valueless. However, if I look around the market, and if you have the same sort of exploration asset in a standalone listed junior, I think it's worth more than our current market cap today. That's my opinion. We'll get in the field and try and prove it up.
That's great to hear. Just on that, Michael, there is a view that some may think that working on Fiery Creek does take some focus away from Citroen. What do you have to say to people who take that point of view?
Look, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, Ali. The processes that we've been working on at Citroen are very long dated, and that's reflective of what is a very large asset. I mentioned earlier, you'd be a top 15 zinc mine in the world today. The capex there is $650 million US. It moves slowly, and projects of that scale typically do. It doesn't mean that we're not able to focus on other things at the same time. I mentioned the seasonality effect of being in Greenland, where activity is typically clustered, certainly project-based activity is clustered between, say, April to September or March to September. So you have a pretty intensive 6-month field season window. It doesn't mean that we're not able to do things at the same time elsewhere. The two assets are very different in scale. I mentioned Fiery Creek does have some scale. I think for an early stage copper gold play, it's very different in scale from what we are trying to do in Greenland. We have very strong relationship with the government of Greenland. We have very strong relationships with US Exim Bank, Glencore, Trafigura, and we're not turning our mind away from what is what could be a company making asset when we move it from where it is today, eventually into production. But as we said, we have the ability to do more than one thing at once, and that's what we intend on doing in the next 6 months. Absolutely.
Well, it's good to hear, and it's good to see shareholder value being created year round. And on that note, always as a broking house, we always appreciate companies when directors are buying stock on market, and I think it's very important, for directors to have skin in the game. So kudos to you, for your own market purchases. As an ending note, Michael, for those that are hearing about Ironbark for the first time, and those who've been part of the story, can you for us summarize why we should be investing in Ironbark right now and why this is the right time?
I think there are a number of reasons, Ali. And firstly, thank you for your comments earlier. And I like being a shareholder as well. And that's important, I think, for everyone to know and understand and expect of their boards. There are a few ways to play zinc on the ASX. There's less than 10 sort of zinc pure plays. There's really only one that's producing today, and there are a number of us that are endeavouring to move projects forward. If I look across the project suite and you do any form of comparison, whether it's EV to resource or stage of development or whichever one you want to apply, I'm very confident that Ironbark measures up exceedingly well on a value proposition. We have a world-class ore body. There is absolutely no doubt about that. We wouldn't have Glencore and Trafigura, two of the top 5 zinc businesses in the world, as shareholders and off-takers of this project if they didn't share that opinion, in my belief. Likewise, US Exim Bank have declared the project to be strategic to them under their 402 program, which is a newly introduced in 2019 part of their bank charter that allows them to be more commercially aggressive in some of their lending, rules to make sure projects are banked with US Exim Bank. So it's not just Ironbark has identified this asset as globally significant, but a number of big groups have done that. So I think if you want to seek out leverage to zinc, there are few, if any, better opportunities on the ASX to do that. Likewise, I think we have an asset at Fiery Creek that is effectively unknown, and partly that's because the company has focused so firmly on Greenland for a long period of time now. So I think those two things jointly give rise to a substantial opportunity and one that we're working hard to build for shareholders.
Well, an exciting 12 months ahead. Thanks again for joining us, Michael, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you, Ali. Look forward to doing it again soon.